Jewish Gospels provides a captivating insight into a period when Jews and Christians were intricately connected, and the concepts of Judaism and Christianity were still taking shape. The author emphasizes that the differences between these two religions, which seem self-evident today, were irrelevant in the historical context. Furthermore, Daniel questions how Jesus was perceived by his contemporaries, highlighting the lack of a clear distinction between Jesus' Jewish followers and Christians. He underscores that during that period, Jews who accepted Jesus and Christians who adhered to kosher dietary laws coexisted at the intersection of religious practices. The author then transports readers to an era when Jesus was seen as the embodiment of a second divine figure. He analyzes how Jesus was perceived by Jews of that time and underscores that the question of differentiation between Judaism and Christianity was not pertinent then. The main thesis of the book is that in antiquity, Judaism and Christianity formed a unified Jewish-Christian heritage, and the concepts of separate religions did not exist at that time. The author challenges readers to reconsider their notions of how Jews and Christians interacted and how they perceived Jesus during that period of history. In his engaging book, Jewish Gospels, The History of the Jewish Christ, Daniel Boyarin invites readers on a journey to an era when Jews and Christians were inseparable, and the terms Judaism and Christianity were still in the process of formation. The author astutely underscores that in antiquity, there was no clear boundary between these two belief systems as we know them today. The terms Judaism and Christianity have been introduced for the sake of analysis to help readers better understand the period when Jesus was perceived as a second divine figure taking on human form. Before us lies a remarkable testament to how many Israelites during Jesus' time anticipated the coming of a Messiah who would simultaneously be divine and take on human form. These very ideas laid the foundation for concepts like the Trinity and the Incarnation present in the world where Jesus was born, and they were reflected in the early Gospels of Mark and John. The relevance of these reflections does not fade with time, but rather takes on new meaning. They become a catalyst for dialogue and a search for common ground between Jews and Christians. It is worth acknowledging that many Jews in the past accepted Jesus as God, and these convictions were not merely impulsive, but rooted in their beliefs and ideas about God. Furthermore, it is a call for Jews to reconsider Christian ideas about God, no longer viewing them as a mere collection of foreign concepts. The concept of God taking on human form is seen as not alien, but rather closely related to ancient Jewish religious beliefs. Realizing that these ideas are part of our own heritage can help bridge the gap between the two branches of world religions and support dialogue despite the differences. A key idea in the book is the assertion that in antiquity, Judaism and Christianity constituted a unified Jewish-Christian heritage. The author emphasizes that the division into religions came much later, and the notion of ethnic identity and religious practices among Jews remained complex and diverse. The book examines the period after the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, when groups of Jews diverged on matters of religious practices, interpretations of the Torah, and other significant aspects. Boyarin underscores that there was no single Judaism, but rather a diversity of opinions and beliefs. The past in which Jews and Christians were distinct groups starts to blur when viewed through the historical lens. Research into early Judaism and Christianity calls us to reevaluate the social dynamics of that time when followers of Jesus and non-followers intertwined, creating a more intricate picture than we are accustomed to seeing. Among the diversity of Jewish communities, there were proselytes, God-fearers, and gerim. Proselytes, while not full-fledged Jews, actively participated in the community. God-fearers were Greeks and pagans who shared monotheistic principles and joined the synagogue community. Gerim, or strangers, were pagans living among the Jewish people and adhering to certain Torah laws. As one reads the book, the visible boundaries between Judaism and Christianity become more blurred than previously thought. Belief in Jesus represents only one of the facets of the multifaceted complex of practices and beliefs existing within what we now call Judaism. This allows for a deeper look into the reality of that time, shedding modern templates and examining events in the context of their era. The author demonstrates that the idea of the Messiah as a savior did not originate with the infant Jesus in Nazareth. It reaches deep into Israel's history. Before Christ was born, this concept permeated ancient beliefs, and one of the early testimonies is the vision of the prophet Daniel, described in the 7th chapter. This aspect of ancient theology is akin to an architectural fragment embedded in a modern building, reminding us that ancient wisdom is still alive and influencing our understanding of the present. In the mythical universe of the Book of Daniel, an image of God emerges as the bearer of the idea of a savior destined to save not only Israel but the entire world. Interestingly, this vision differs from the traditional conception of a high king from the house of David. The author of the book invites us to analyze how this divine figure, who received dominion, glory, and a kingdom, attains eternal dominion that can never be destroyed. Let's approach the original text without additional interpretations and focus on a key point: the figure referred to as the Son of Man. This raises the question of whether this divine entity is merely a human-like being. This image of God, acting as a redeemer, will have a significant impact on the interpretation of the gospel and help us better understand the connection between this divine redeemer and the human Messiah from the house of David. The Judaism of Jesus, as discussed, served as a unique response to the radical transformations in legislation introduced by the Pharisees and scribes of Jerusalem. The perspective on the Gospel of Mark serves as a key to understanding this context and significantly influences our perception of the entire Christian canon. Contemporary scholars, based on widely accepted viewpoints, assert that the Gospel of Mark is the most ancient of the Synoptic Gospels and was composed after the destruction of the Temple in 70 CE. Matthew and Luke, it appears, used Mark as a foundation, adding their modifications and incorporating other sources for a more comprehensive account of Jesus' life and teachings. A new interpretation of the connection between the Synoptic Gospels arises against the backdrop of the understanding that the idea of Jesus abolishing the law became a central aspect of the Christian movement. The assumption that the author of Mark was a non-Jew, unfamiliar with Jewish tradition, allows us to view the beginnings of Christianity as a departure from Jewish ways of life. However, if Mark was a member of the Jewish community, then Jesus, also a member of this community, could have been perceived as a leader of one of the currents within Judaism, opposing another group, namely the Pharisees, as dangerous innovators. Jesus levels serious accusations against the Pharisees, asserting that they introduced practices that not only did not align with the Torah, but even contradicted it. His opposition to the traditions of the elders, which they regarded on par with Torah teachings, underscores his struggle against what he deemed a distortion of true religious doctrines. Jesus' Galilean disciples adhere to their traditions, emphasizing that impure foods cannot defile a person. Their decision not to wash their hands before eating reflects resistance to the innovations imposed by the Pharisees and reflects Galileans' aversion to changes proposed by representatives of the Jerusalem community. Based on the historical context, one can conclude that Mark, the creator of this portrait of Jesus, was himself a Jew strictly adhering to the laws. His gospel, even in its most radical parts, does not attempt to depart from Judaism or create a new religion. Instead, the text should be perceived as a Jewish document fitting into the context of Messianic movements of the time. The notion of a suffering Messiah, capable of atoning for sins, became so significant in Jewish tradition that it firmly rooted itself in its history. it is essential to remember that this idea was not merely incorporated by Jesus' followers in the formation of Christianity. It was an integral part of a long Jewish religious paradigm. A retrospective look at ancient, medieval, and early Jewish traditions reveals that the concept of a suffering Messiah who atones for sins was quite familiar to Jewish minds. This phenomenon undoubtedly challenges the notion of a radical rupture between Judaism and Christianity, as these ideas underwent evolution while maintaining their relevance over many centuries. Thus, not only do the Gospels draw on deep roots of Jewish tradition, but the ideas of a suffering Messiah continue to be an integral part of our shared heritage, interwoven with cultural layers and historical periods. Christianity and its sacred texts, the Old and New Testaments, often become subjects of debate regarding whether they were historically accurate or, as some Jews claim, Christianity merely appropriated and distorted their traditions. In this context, the book provides a fascinating twist. It simultaneously raises doubts about how Christianity used Jewish texts and offers a new perspective on the roots of Christian faith. According to the author, Christianity didn't merely steal Jewish texts, but also divorced them from their Jewish context and cultural origin, raising the question of whether this was an attack on Jewish traditions or simply an attempt to preserve them. Such a reassessment lends a profound literary and cultural context to Christian texts. In my view, this book not only offers a reevaluation of Christian and Jewish texts, but also presents a new way to consider their interactions and intersections in historical context. The book Jewish Gospels explores various Jewish texts and sources related to the history and culture of the Jewish people, as well as events associated with Jesus Christ. It delves into Jewish Gospels that didn't make it into the New Testament, but are crucial for understanding the historical context and life of Jesus. Key ideas in the book Jewish Gospels include exploration of Jewish sources. The author analyzes different Jewish texts and traditions, such as the Talmud and Midrash, to understand their potential influence on Jesus Christ's life and teachings, establishing connections between Christianity and Judaism. Reconstructing history. The book aims to reconstruct the historical backdrop of Jesus' era and describe Jewish customs and beliefs at that time. This provides a better understanding of Jesus within Jewish history and traditions. Alternative versions of events. Jewish Gospels examines alternative accounts of events in Jesus' life that differ from canonical Gospels. These alternative narratives may shed light on different aspects of his teachings and life. Cultural contexts. The book emphasizes the importance of grasping the Jewish culture and traditions of that era to interpret Jesus' messages and teachings accurately, allowing readers to delve deeper into the context of the Jewish world in the 1st century CE. Jewish Gospels represents a significant contribution to the study of early Christianity and its ties to Judaism. It enhances our understanding of Jesus Christ's life and teachings and the historical context in which they unfolded.